Do you only consume news, or do you produce news, share it, tweet, Facebook like it, etc.?
Well, I guess I would share on Facebook. I would share articles that I would find interesting contemporarily at the time.
Hey, would you qualify that as content creation?
No, I wouldn't.
I talk about it at work and stuff like that in my kitchen.
I tend to not do as much tweeting. Facebook, occasionally I'll post something. Mostly I'll just send an email to somebody or an IM being like, hey, read this link.
It's important because that's what news is, right? People, as I said, it's recent events. So whatever we read is whatever events get shared the most. So yes, I think news, I do produce news myself, yes.
Yeah, I usually read news online. Even if that's the TV channel, that must be the channel of the TV. I also share it online in my blog.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's something really interesting, I might share it. Especially if it's something I feel like people need to see.
I just consume news.
I guess we kind of all like to think of ourselves as some sort of news creators and publishers.
If I care about something, I try to frame my perspective of it and share it with people who respect my opinion in any way. And even if they don't, I try to share it in a way that's honest and, share my experience.
I don't think I create news any more than I used to. I tell people about what I'm doing a lot more than I used to. Whether that has changed the definition of news, I have no idea. I think there's a danger of confusing the media and the message in a sense. I don't think I create news any more than I used to, but I do tell people about what I'm doing all the time.
If I was a news producer, what I would create is a fairer intake of what I share,
That's so general. What would I create? Are you asking me about what kind of content I would create? What I would write?
Yeah, either one would be fine.
Either one would be fine.
I would put more black people on the news.
Try and talk about, I guess, politics in a very, it'd be fun trying to be very sensationalist and go from a very Republican side and a very Democratic side. That'd be very interesting for me.
I would, anything serious happens, in society, I always feel like it happens to a black person first, but it's just not news. And it takes usually some white girl and Nancy Drew to make people get out of their seats. So that's what I do.
If I had to make news, I would just try to provide as much information as possible and describe it as best as I possibly could.
Well, I'd actually just go back to probably old school news reporting and have people be honest and not like yelling and screaming at each other during news broadcasts.
I would, if I had the choice, I think editorials are very important. Opinions, columns, things of that sort.
I would try to create genuine, informed, highbrow debate, because I think that's missing. I think people tend to get the news, be informed about something, be informed about events in a much more kind of, they go out and grab that from where they need it. I think it's a much more user-driven thing. If I was producing something, it would be much more focused on the debate, on the arguments from both sides, and on kind of raising the standard of debate.
And again, I personally am interested in world events, so things that look at different trends on a macro scale. So I would be interested in having columns or editorials or opinion pieces written on macro thematic events.
We seem to have become fixated with going for the lowest common denominator and for looking at things at a very superficial level, and there is very little, well certainly in the UK, there's little in-depth debate to be found.
It's probably more there than anywhere else, but it's not enough. It's not good enough.
How would I improve the quality of news? I think it's like, in America, the word socialism is so demonized, but capitalism has kind of failed in the sense where, you know, I agree with you. You should, if you work hard for something, you should be able to keep it. That's the way. I agree with that. That makes sense. But I don't think that's the way things have gone. I think it's just been privilege handed down to privilege, and the idea of capitalism is just an excuse for keeping that privilege.
More news sources, less large news sources would be great, actually. Less large sources owned by multinationals would be great, actually.
And I think that the system has kind of failed, especially in the news, because capitalism's promise was people's best product is the one that wins over. You know, the product that people want to see the most, and that's not what news is.
I think that getting more sources, sometimes I think that they put something out there very quickly, so you get like sort of a snippet, but then it's half wrong. So if people just waited a little bit longer or asked more people, I think that would increase the quality, and also kind of, you know, get more references. Like, we found this from XYZ, and we asked this person from XYZ, and we backed it up with this.
Well, maybe it is now because people want to see crap, but it doesn't tell the truth, and I think to improve it, you have to take the same people who monetarily cripple the economy, monetarily because it's redundant, but people whose money is their first intention instead of actually sharing the news.
Less debates and arguments over what's going on, opinionated news. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't do anybody any good.
I think, okay,
so 24-hour news. There's this constant,
absolutely.
With 24-hour news, what's happened is that they have to constantly fill, so they have to fill the gaps before the next news story comes in, and so they end up repeating and speculating, and there's a lot of rubbish that comes out, whereas if the things were streamlined...
It's just, there's so many different outlets for media and news. I mean, it's a 24-hour-a-day thing that's there.
Perhaps not to go back to how it was 15 years ago with one news bulletin a day, but if things were slightly more streamlined, I think there would be, this more in-depth ability would be possible. But yeah, 24-hour news is a lot.
I guess because they have to fill the time, they harp on news stories that maybe aren't even necessarily news, or they just create something that's not even there. I think maybe if it was just more streamlined and less, maybe cut it from 24 to 15 hours a day or something like that, that might be more productive.
I think that's right. The irony is that in creating a complete wall-to-wall channel for news, actually what that's resulted in is superficiality. It's resulted in desperate news producers trying to fill airtime.
I think it's important to keep news non-biased.
And actually what's really missing is to focus in on a small number of issues in a controlled way and really dive deep into them. Of course, there's a lot of editorial judgment in that because, you know, what are the issues and how are we going to approach them? But I think that's what's missing, is that real depth and the sense of just stepping back, breathing, taking the time, and then producing.
Although I did say columns and editorials are interesting to read, if we're talking about big news sources that provide information to a wide range of people, it's important that that information is not skewed or presented with certain language in a certain way to you know, send a specific type of message.
True investigative journalism, that's what's missing.
That's also, yeah, that's a part of it.
I think that that's where people form, they form ignorant thoughts, I guess is the best word. You know, the information they're being provided is skewed, and based on that skewed information, they produce their own biases, which are generally wrong because, again, the way it was presented is inherently biased.